Hi everyone, this is Mayor Farrah N, and with today's Chat with the Mayor, I'm going to be speaking with our City of Irvine arborist, Reece. Well, thank you so much for taking time out today to kind of talk to me and really share with our community the importance of our tree canopy in the city. And so, one of the questions that I always get is like, how many trees do we have in the city? So do you have like a number that you can share about our city trees?
Yeah, absolutely. So the last time we did a really in-depth analysis, the city of Irvine has approximately 500,000 trees. Now those are not all maintained by the city. Our maintenance requirement is about 80,000 trees of those that are city maintained. But yeah, about 500,000 trees. So that's roughly, 2 trees a resident.
That's amazing. That is amazing. And so when we are planting trees on the city side, what do you guys think when you're choosing what type of tree goes where? What's the thought process behind that?
Well, there's actually a lot that goes into that. It's really a lot based on our experience as arborists and in the landscape world. Trees need a multiple of factors to survive. They need space to grow, they need soil that's appropriate, and they need water and they need light. So when we're selecting trees, a lot of it really does have to do with the species characteristics. How big is that tree going to grow? Is that soil and is that exposure to sun going to be appropriate for that tree? So really a lot of horticulture knowledge, some agronomic knowledge that goes into that. And then there's the aesthetic side of it. So we're selecting trees to kind of create an environment. So we're looking at trees that flower for accenting entryways, or trees that are really big and creating a canopy and a shade for areas that need to be more of a corridor space.
And then are you also taking into account like the native trees that are native to our area? Because we are all constantly hearing about us being in a drought situation.
Sure.
And then people that drive into Irvine are like, how are you guys so green?
Yes, 100%. The water requirement is a major factor in deciding what trees to select. Now in this area, really this is a semi-desert type landscape here. Our native trees are pretty few and far between. We have the coast live oak, and then we have the California sycamore. Almost all the other trees that we bring into this environment are really not technically native, but what we look for is we want them to be well adapted to the climate here and then the water requirements.
Something that's very particular to Irvine is our recycled water that is used. So can you talk a little bit about how that's incorporated throughout our open spaces?
Nearly all the areas we maintain are almost 100% maintained with recycled water. And that recycled water is great, right? Because we're not depleting our potable water, which is used for domestic purposes. There's just so much water consumed by a landscape and by turf. Absolutely makes sense to be on recycled water. However, it brings its own set of challenges. So there's stuff in that recycled water that is not really conducive to growing certain plants to 100% of their health. So we've had to adapt. We've discovered certain species of trees, shrubs, other plant material that just doesn't really jive with the recycled water, and we've had to make changes to our plant pellets to make that work.
So that's great to hear. And now I'm going to shift a little bit because before Irvine became this amazing city, it was a lot of farmland, and a lot of farmland was bordered by the eucalyptus trees. And so now I know that we're taking some of those out, and I hear from our residents, why are we taking eucalyptus trees out?
Certainly.
So could you explain to us a little bit about why we end up doing that?
Yeah, absolutely. So just a little history of why those trees are here. Going back to really the turn of the 20th century, some of those trees were planted. Most of them are approximately about 100 years old at this point. And those trees were planted initially as protection for crops that were being grown when it was Irvine Ranch. Now those were protecting citrus crops. Later, kind of in the 30s, 40s, they really shifted from those citrus crops over to row crops. And just having these trees in as wind protection and around an agricultural use, they took a lot of abuse. But they did absolutely kind of create the iconic picture of what Irvine was at that time. You have these extensive rows that are running from one end of the city to the next. And that was an aesthetic that came along with the city. So it kind of developed with us here in Irvine. Now the challenges that we had with those trees specifically are the blue gum eucalyptus. Those are some of the oldest that we have in town. They are right in the middle of where homes have been developed right up to where these trees exist. And so everything has changed around them. And back when it was agriculture, you had tractors disking fields, you had times where roots were being damaged, you had trees being pruned because they were actually shading out the crops and that needed to be dealt with. Anytime you prune a tree, over prune it, or you actually damage the roots, you open up a pathway for a pathogen to get in. And in this case, what we're dealing with is a brown rot. So this is a fungus that's developed in the roots over time. And we believe, primarily it's come from the roots into the tree. And what we've been seeing with the blue gum eucalyptus specifically is internal decay. And so that's what we're doing. We're doing a really unique project right now. Irvine is probably definitely the biggest project to use sonic tomography ever.
And what is that?
Sonic tomography is it's a particular instrument that we use in the arboriculture world. It's basically using sound to map internal decay. So it's looking at the density of wood through using sound. So it's a series of nails that are put into the tree, tapping on it with a specialized hammer and a computerized device that actually measures the speed of sound across that tree, and it actually comes out with a map of what the decay looks like, which has really been interesting because we've tested over 1,000 trees at this point, and we have removed trees based on some of these risk assessments, and we're actually able to see the accuracy of this instrument. So seeing the actual rot that was portrayed in the tomograms, what the picture's called, and then actually when we get a chainsaw through it and we're seeing it in real life, the matchup is incredible. What we're removing those trees for, it's all about public safety. It's reducing risk. And so we are replanting a eucalyptus that's much more adapt for this type of an environment that we're replanting in its place. So we're still going to continue that aesthetic, windrow look,
right,
but we do have to address the risk at hand. So we just don't want to see a tree fail in a rain or a storm event and then impact, worst case scenario, hurting somebody or causing severe property damage. So that's what our main objective is out there.
Thank you. And then, a lot of times people talk about having shade throughout our parks and our playgrounds. So what are we doing moving forward to make sure that there is shade throughout the city?
So one of our big pieces of our program is being a Tree City USA through the Arbor Foundation.
Right.
And so a part of that is having an ordinance that requires, we only remove trees for specific criteria. We minimize the amount of trees that we have to remove by using experts that are trained in arboriculture to assess trees when we need to look at, well, is this tree going to be viable here or not? And then the other side of that is we're constantly planting trees. We try to have a 1-to-1 ratio going all the time.
Oh, that's
so
amazing.
the amount of trees we're taking out, we're always trying to match that by the
Right.
amount of trees that we're planting.
That's really amazing.
Yeah.
What is something that people can get excited about as our city is growing and it's moving forward when it comes to trees?
One exciting program that we do have coming up that we're about to kick off this year is our residential tree care program. So there's a few neighborhoods within Irvine that, believe it or not, are not in an HOA. But what we're doing is proactively reaching out to them, and we're saying, hey, would you like a tree planted in your parkway? Because that is the public right-of-way.
Right.
And even though it's their land technically, a lot of people are having a really great response. And so we're planting the trees, and then we're providing a maintenance program for them too. So we're maintaining them, also watering them and fertilizing them to get them established. And then we're also looking out throughout those several neighborhoods on how we can help the trees that are already existing there. So we've really upped the ante in the areas where there's trees on private land. That how can we help? How can we grow the tree canopy?
And people can always go to the cityofirvine.org to learn more about what to do with their trees that they have right now, or how to plant a tree, or what trees are good. And so thank you so much for taking the time today. This was really helpful.
Absolutely.
And
My
I hope
pleasure.
our community really finds it helpful because people love trees here.
Awesome. So do we. So,
Thank you.
thank you.